Hello? I'm rambling. Who knew it? I'm excited. Thank you. Um, I knew that what I was doing, people in America would not appreciate because we are a military-industrial complex that is very mechanically oriented and people think mechanically. And basically, everyone's an organ grinder's monkey who's basically an abused animal that is learned what they've learned by rote technique, and they've been through this gauntlet of suffering and pain, and whether it works for them or not, boy, they're dedicated to it. You better do what they did. You better go through what they went through. So people don't want to question their dogmas, which is why the one line in my book that people make the most comment on, which is my favorite line in the opening introduction, the very last line says, "Let my karma run over your dogma." And I know that's a rather mean-spirited line, but it's just so true. If people can understand that their unquestioning faith in what it is that they do is the very thing that's holding them back from progress. People who adapt to things do not create progress, but unreasonable men, revolutionaries, we think outside the box. We are discontent and malcontent with the way things are. We question authority. We re-question and re-question things over and over and over again until we have breakthroughs. And so all true progress in the world is truly made by unreasonable men. And I hope I'm the most unreasonable man out there. I've learned that in Europe, where people are taught solfege and they get this ear training, they're much more open to this idea of the movable dose system. And they understand, as any scientists understand, that Newtonian concepts of gravity were fine. But when we start looking at things on an atomic level, or we start looking at the cosmos, these theories are not adequate anymore and they break down. And they need to be replaced with relativity. And when you take Pythagorean's theorem and you start throwing that into Galileo, you get Galilean relativity. When you take those theories and you add them to Newton's theories, you start getting Newtonian relativity. And these are the new areas that are being taught in college today, Newtonian relativity. They're just taking Pythagoras' theorem, so you can add this Einsteinian stretching, and you take this notion that everything is relative and in constant motion, and that everything defines everything by everything else, and they just bring that into those old formulas, and whoop, bang, boom, it works on an atomic level, it works on a cosmic level. That's all I'm doing here. I'm not replacing everyone's Newtonian idea of music. I'm not throwing out the ABC. Quite the contrary, I can do the ABCs better than anybody I know. I don't think anybody out there but me realizes that there are actually 33 keys, not 12, not the usual 7, 14, 15 that are taught, not the 17 possibilities that exist with the 7 keys on the white keys on the piano, and then each black key has 2 names, so that's 10 plus 17 keys that you can spell on the keyboard. But when you get off of keyboard instruments onto things like violins and cellos, which are non-fretted instruments, you find out that C sharp is higher in pitch than D flat, which is lower in pitch. There's a slight difference between those two, and to create perfect tunings of the perfect tunings of the diatonic scale, rather than the tempered tunings, we use mean tuning, what's known as mean tuning, or well-tempered tunings or perfect tunings. These tunings allow people on violins and strings to play many, 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 many more scales. And it turns out theoretically there are 33 keys and 33 spellings, which I know and can do off the top of my head. So people write me vicious email all the time saying, "What's wrong with you teaching this number thing? It's too simplistic. It'll never work. Give it up. Go back to the ABC. teach what I teach. And sometimes every now and then I get a group of people coming out here with torches trying to think of me as Frankenstein and trying to drive me out of town and out of the music business. And I realize that in Europe, that won't happen. In Europe, people see me as an eccentric and an unreasonable innovator who has hit upon something in terms of this movable dough relativity and can see what I see, which is this is a way of seeing the bones behind everything that's holding up the rest of the body frame. And that once we understand the skeleton and how the bones work and the ligaments, we can put muscles on that, and then we can put skin on top of that, and then we have a whole body. And the anatomy, but an artist understands that about anatomy. When an artist looks at you and wants to draw a picture of you, they start by looking at your skeletal structure first, and then with their imagination, they put the rest of you together and then draw a picture. This is the way art works, and I know that in Europe it will catch on. So I'm really pleased to have found you. I'm very pleased that you're interested in this. Couple quick things before I go. One, please send me, I know that this is the internet and a lot of people are paranoid about sending someone their address or their phone number or anything like that. My phone number, my address to my school is listed on my web page. If anybody out there would like to send me a piece of snail mail or something like that and is interested, I'm willing to respond. If it's vicious, I've got a trash can. I throw it away. I won't take it too personal. If, on the other hand, you send me a place in which I can send you something, don't worry about the cost. Don't give me this, I know it costs too much to send things to India, look, it's a gift from my heart, and I really want to share this with someone who cares, and you've made it very clear to me that like a good pit bull, you're interested in this, and you're going to bite down and you're not going to let go, and no matter where I go, I'm going to have to shake you off my leg, and I love that. Thank you. That is a gift that you are giving to me. I appreciate that. So, give me a way to get in touch with you, and I will send you a copy of my book. The fingering charts that I'm talking about will be fingering charts for things like trumpets and French horns and violins and mandolins and guitar and things. I've developed this thing to learn to play all 41 of these musical instruments. I've taken this intervalometer and I've created devices and I've created fingering charts with this intervalometer so you can learn to spell and play all the keys on any instrument. You got a 6-hole flute there. I happen to have a fingering chart for a universal 6-hole flute, and you can learn to play not only in the key of G or G sharp, whatever you say it is there, but starting on any hole or any half hole, you can learn to play the chromatic scale on that flute, and you can learn to play in every key equally well on that $4 flute. Believe me, I know. I've done it, and it's not that hard. So I can send you a fingering chart that'll show you how to do this and get started. Also, I'd like to send you an intervalometer. If you measure your G sharp from the center of your G sharp to the other center of your G sharp on your harmonia, and give me the physical measurement, I will take this intervalometer that I have, and I will use my Xerox machine to scale it down so it fits your little keyboard, and I will send you a copy of that so you can put it on your keyboard and slide it around and play around with it. And I'd be more than happy to send you a copy of my book, because it would be a lot easier for you to go through the book and see a lot of these things. It brings up all these questions and all these spellings, and then ask me some things, and I can make small videos. The whole world is watching us. I haven't done this before. I have not been posting a lot on YouTube. There's a lot there, but there's a lot that I haven't posted. And in the last 6 months or so, I've been discouraged from doing so because I get a lot of bad email from people here in America who are spending all their time being, torchbearers of some old tradition that even they don't know or understand that well. And I'm not in a war with anybody. The only person I compete with is myself, The only person I compete against is myself, and the only one I care about learning this stuff is for the sake of the whole world and music itself. It has nothing to do with people and egos. This has to do with music. And I'd love to share that with you. Also, I see here, let's see, on your the fingering charts, etc., your flute, jazz. To answer your question briefly, when you build chords on every one of the diatonic scales, and I saw you teaching, so you know this. Let's take the C scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If you build a chord on the C chord, C, E, G, it's the numbers 1, 3, and 5, and that chord is automatically a major chord. If you build a chord in the second position, or what would normally be the Dorian mode, as you were teaching, you are doing D, and then F, and then A, and that is 2, 4, and 6. So the natural integer numbers 2, 4, and 6 actually produce a minor chord. The third position, if you build the chord, every other note on that, build up a third, it's a minor third, a major third. So again, 3, 5, 6 is a minor chord. The next chord, 4, 6, 1, is a major chord. 5, 7, 2 is a major chord. The sixth chord, 6, 1, 3, is naturally, those numbers are naturally a minor chord. And then 7, 2, 4, you get a natural minor third with a minor third stacked on top of it, what we call a diminished chord. And in jazz, when they add a flat 7 to that, they call that a half diminished chord, which is natural to that spelling. So what you get is major chord, minor chord, major, major, minor, diminished. As you know, you teach this. Well, when you're improvising, we use 3 primary chords. The 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord are your primary chords. And those primary chords, by the way, in physics are called Bell's theorem. If you look up Bell's theorem, A, B, and C as circles overlapping, A is not B, and A is not C, and A is equal to a region of B, and A is equal to a region of C, etc., and you do the math, you express a concept in physics called the classical concept of physics called Bell's theorem. And the mathematics, the calculus, mathematics of Bell's theorem and the linear algebra expression of Bell's theorem is the primary colors of the rainbow and the primary colors in sound. So if we take those 3 primary colors, 1, 3, 5, the 1 chord, 4, 6, 1, the 4 chord, 5, 7, 2, we have the diatonic scale in all 3 of those chords, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I play the 1 chord, I can play, say I play a C chord, I can play any of the light keys against that C chord. Some notes will be slightly out of tune and have dissonances, and the notes 1, 3, and 5 will be in tune and resolve. So we go from dissonances to resolution, dissonance to resolution within that. If I move over to the 4 chord, same. All of the light keys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all harmonize with that 4 chord. If I move over to the 5 major chord, they all harmonize. Now those 3 primary chords have exactly the same relationship to the scale that red, blue, and green have, or red, blue, and yellow in light have in painting. If you take the 3 colors, red, blue, and green, and you make little circles and you overlap them, what you will wind up is with 7 colors. And those 7 colors will be the 7 natural colors of the rainbow. And they will occur in exactly the way from the purple all the way on through the greens and the yellows all the way up to the red spectrum. And you will get everywhere from the red infrared all the way spewed through to the purple ultraviolet. And these 3 primary colors create 7 basic colors of the rainbow, and those 7 colors of the rainbow create 4,096 other colors on your computer screen, and then those things adding white and black to enhance them, and adding tints, various other types of tints and things to them, you can create approximately 16 million colors. Well, the same is true in sound. You can take the three primary chords, 1, 4, and 5, and it creates those 7 diatonic notes are in all those chords. If you'll notice when you're singing a melody, quite often, if the melody pauses on a note and is held, for instance, if it pauses on the number 2, usually you're sounding a 5 chord because the only place that you'll find the number 2 is in the 5 chord. The 2 will be dissonant in regards to the 1 chord. It will be dissonance in regard to the 4 chord, but it will harmonize and fall right into the Natch of the 5 chord. So when you're just moving up and down, you can play any of those 3 chords, but if you pause or hold a note, then it's best to have one of those 3 chords that correspond to that diatonic sound. So if I'm playing those 3 chords, I can just move up and down the diatonic scale as freely as I want to with no problem whatsoever. What happens with the 5 flat or 4 sharp and the 2 flat or the 1 sharp is that one of those minor chords is made major. If I take the 2 chord, 2, 4, 6, and I raise the 3rd up and move it from being a minor chord to a major chord and express that 2 chord as a major chord, now the 4 becomes a 4 sharp. There's your 5 flat. In classical music, the terminology is 4 sharp, or tritone, 1, 1 to 4 sharp, tritone. In jazz music, they always look at it as the 5th being lowered down, or the 5 flat. So the spellings are 5 flat. Classical music, raise the 4. In jazz music, lower the 5th. In both cases, you're creating what's called the tritone, which creates dissonance. And that's happening because the 2 chord is being sounded as a major chord instead of a minor chord. So in a lot of music where you use a 1, 4, 5 chord, the next chord that is usually added into that would be a 2 chord moving to the 5 chord. And when we do that, if it's naturally minor, I just use the diatonic scale. But if I make the 2 major moving to the 5 chord, then I can use the 5 flat or 4 sharp in my melody. And that's why those notes came up in the melody at that particular time, because that chord was being changed from its natural minor state, forced into the major state. Now, a 6 chord is naturally 6, 1, 6, 1, 3. Again, if I want to take that 6 chord, which is naturally minor, and I make the 6 chord a major chord instead, then what happens is the 1 will be raised up to a 1 sharp, or you could see it as a 2 flat, and that will happen to the melody. So what's happening at that point in the music is, instead of the natural 6 chord happening there, which is minor, it's being forced to be a major 6 chord in the music, and that opens up this other tonal possibility for the melody of being a 1 sharp. So what you really have is a 4 sharp and a 1 sharp in the music, and that only happens in those places in the music. They just don't happen arbitrarily. So what jazz does is jazz tries to take these 3-note structures and make them 4-note structures. So we take 1, 3, 5, and add the major 7th to it. We get a 1 major 7th chord, which allows us to bring in that new scenario, that new color tone, the major 7th. If we do that to the 4 chord, we have 4, 6, 1, 3, and that is a major 7th as well. No numbers are really changing there much. If we take the 5 chord, 5, 7, 2, and add the 4, that 4 is a whole step below the root instead of only a half a step. The 1, 3, 5, 7, the 7 is a half a step below 1, so it's a major 7th. In the 4, 6, 1, 3, the 3 is a half a step below the 4, so that is a major 7th. But in the 5 chord, we get what's called a dominant chord. The 5, 7, 2, the 4 is a whole step or major second below the root, and that is a flat 7, which I like to call a flevin. And this is where the flevin comes in. That Flevin is a very magical note because the seventh is the seventh overtone of the overtone series. And you know, in mysticism, the seventh son of the seventh son is magical. When we take the seventh overtone, instead of getting a normal major seventh, we wind up with a flat seven, and that's the first occurrence of the dominant chord in the system. The relationship between the three of that chord and the flat seven is a tritone. And that chord, a dominant chord, has a tritone in it, and the tritone creates a lot of tension. It's the harshest or most tense interval in the system, and it creates a lot of thermal energy emotion. And what that four-note chord does is it opens up the entire chromatic scale. If you play 1, 3, 5, flat 7, you'll be able to play any notes you want. Not just the white keys, but you can play any chromatic tone you want, and it will harmonize. And if I play 4, 6, 1, flat 3, making that a dominant chord, I can play all the white keys and any black key I want, and it will make melodic sense. And if I play the natural 5-7 chord, which is a dominant chord, I will also be able to play all the white keys and any of the black keys. So those 5 pentatonic black keys get mapped in. That seventh overtone opens up the whole system, allowing the chromatic tones to make sense and sound harmonized. And that's the secret behind jazz, my friend, and everyone out there that's watching. The secret to jazz is that they're using 4-note chords. And any time we add a flat 7 to a chord, making it a dominant chord, we're creating a tritone relationship between the third and the flat 7, which is ambivalent and creates a lot of tension, which has the magic property of mapping in all the chromatic tones as being harmonious. And by playing that dominant chord, I can now play all 12 notes become equal, and anything can be used as my melody. That's it in a nutshell, okay? Applying that's a whole other thing. And you'll see that normally people use the normal 2 minor chord, they use the normal 6 minor chord, and occasionally change those to majors, so the 4 sharp and the 1 sharp come in. Occasionally people will change the 4 chord to a dominant chord. That brings in the 3 flat now. The first good blues note that we have comes into the picture, so you can see that as a 2 sharp or a 3 flat, and now that becomes a melodic note. And what happens is, as we map more and more and more of those other alternate notes outside of the white note diatonic scale in, we're altering the natural default of those diatonic chords, either by adding in a 4th note, which opens up that scenario, or we're modifying it from its natural minor to a major, which adds in that note, or we're taking a major chord like the 5 chord or the 4 chord or the 1 chord and making it minor, adding in those extra steps. That's all that's happening in a nutshell. Now, applying that's a whole other thing, and how often it gets used and what we do with it is a whole other thing. But jazz is no harder than constructing all of your chords as 4-note chords rather than as 3-note chords. 3-note chords, you are diatonic. 4-note chords, you're chromatic, baby. And you can do whatever you want. It opens up the ear to any possibility whatsoever. We'll get into that more a little bit later on, and I think it's page 40 or 42 in my book, just one page devoted to this idea. And jazz is not any harder than that. As far as improvisation is concerned, another whole bag of tricks, but basically it's a whole lot. If you're using 3-note chords, you can play any diatonic note you want in any order you want and just go with your heart. If you're playing 4-note chords, then you can play the whole chromatic scale and go with your heart, okay? Everything works. Now, playing all these other scales against this and that, and then it's just a matter of the fact that we have 4-note chords. It now opens up diminished scales, augmented scales, altered scales. All these other scales are just ways, they're just schemes for mapping in more of the chromatic tones into the diatonic scale. So the diatonic scale is basic. The chords built on the diatonic scale has a normal default template, and then we modify that template, and the more we modify that template, the more possibilities get mapped in, until eventually all notes are equal, all rules are off, and you can do whatever it is you want to do. So that's it. 3 half-hour videos, I think, here. See them at your leisure. Nice talking at you. Next time we'll give some demonstrations. I hope I've covered everything in the notes that you've sent me, and peace.